This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've ever, looked at the history of Western philosophy and thought, this just feels dense, it feels abstract, and maybe even a bit misplaced, then you're in exactly the right place. We're not just covering history today, we're attempting a pretty radical re-examination of the whole thing. We've gone through your sources, and our mission is a total deep dive into what philosophy truly is by stripping away about 2,000 years of narrative.
And the central thesis here, the really provocative part of the source material, is that the history of philosophy is not some glorious straight line towards discovering eternal truth.
Not progress?
Not at all. It's fundamentally the history of different, let's call them problem processing styles, just different ways the generations tried to organize all their confusing knowledge and, well, deal with complexity.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Our goal is to show how a much simpler, more practical, and frankly gentle philosophy, one that was all about the real world, how that got sidelined, how it was replaced by this abstract tradition that got way too tangled up with theology and these huge theoretical frameworks were basically tracing two completely different paths.
That's the key. The whole structure is this division. On one side, you have what we're calling the practical route. Think Socrates, Aristotle, Avicenna, Francis Bacon.
The doers.
The doers, exactly. They cared about consensus, about tools, about usable knowledge. Then on the other side, you have the abstract route. That's your Plato, and much later Hegel. They were all about these eternal, top-down, absolute truths.
And the argument is that the first path, the practical one, is what philosophy was always supposed to be.
That's the argument, yeah.
So the whole game really kicks off in ancient Greece. It's this foundational fight, right? Socrates versus Protagoras.
Right, Protagoras the sophist. His view, man is the measure of all things, it was radical relativism.
What does that actually mean, though? Man is the measure.
It means truth is totally relative to you, the individual. If the air feels hot to you, then it is hot for you. It doesn't matter what a thermometer says or what anyone else feels. There is no outside authority.
And Socrates saw this kind of chaos of opinions. And he basically said, this can't work. You can't run a society like this. He was searching for a required oneness for ideas like courage or justice.
A common definition.
Yeah, something everyone in the city-state could at least start from.
And we have to be super clear here. This Socratic oneness is not modern scientific objectivity. He wasn't looking for some universal, unchanging fact.
Right.
He was after what the sources call demonstrative objectivity. It's more like a common standard, an intellectual center of gravity that people could agree on through dialogue. It's about the possibility of reconciliation.
So the whole project wasn't about some mystic quest for truth. It was a practical need for social order.
Absolutely.
And once you get that, the history suddenly becomes much, much easier to read. You can just follow that practical route right down through the centuries.
And that route is all about building and refining tools. Look at Aristotle. His huge contribution wasn't discovering abstract ideals. It was giving us the actual tools, the logic, the categories to organize the real world.
He was building a usable knowledge system.
A system for classifying all the crazy diversity of reality. It was practical.
Which then gets picked up centuries later by people like Avicenna. And this is where the perspective just totally flips for me.
Yeah.
Avicenna wasn't trying to write grand philosophy. His day job was medicine and administration.
Exactly. He didn't just use Aristotle's logic. He basically created what you could call the medicalization of philosophy. He turned abstract knowledge into an operable form.
So like a doctor diagnosing an illness.
That's a perfect analogy. You classify symptoms, you apply logic, you figure out a course of action. Avicenna used the Aristotelian framework, the four causes, all of it, not to find God, but to treat his patients and run an empire. Knowledge became a technology.
And that thread runs straight to the birth of modern science, to Francis Bacon.
Right. Bacon comes along and systematizes induction. He turns it into the engine of the scientific revolution. When he says knowledge is power, he's not being abstract.
No, he's echoing Avicenna.
He is. He means knowledge is a tool for control, for improvement. He's connecting Aristotle's organizational project directly to modern science.
Okay, so that's the practical line.
Right.
Now we have to zoom out and look at the bigger structural problem that, well, this practical line was basically avoiding.
And that problem is all about the difference between induction and deduction. This is the deep flaw in mainstream philosophy.
This distinction is everything, isn't it?
It is. So induction is the path from the specific, from material reality, what they call the submetaphysical, up to the abstract principles. It's bottom up.
And deduction is the other way.
The total opposite. It's going from the big abstract idea, the metaphysical, down to the specific. It's top-down, applying rules that already exist.
In science today, that's a loop, right? The kind of spiral. You observe things to make rules, and you use rules to test new observations.
A two-way traffic.
But the sources argue that traditional philosophy had this huge structural defect. It was overwhelmingly biased towards deduction.
Yeah.
Why would you prefer that top-down approach?
The reason is actually pretty simple, but it's profound. Western philosophy started, and for the most part stayed, trapped by the idea that absolute truth already exists.
Like Plato's ideals?
Plato's ideals. Or later, and this is even more powerful, the absolute revealed truth of Christian doctrine. The answers were already there. They were fixed.
So if the absolute truth is already, up there, you don't really need induction.
You don't. Why would you do the hard work of building up from messy, contradictory experience if the answer is already given to you?
You just need to apply the rules.
Exactly. Your only job is deduction. The difficult, uncertain process of induction was basically ignored for centuries because the conclusion was already decided from the start.
Wow. That's a devastating way to look at it. It's like the whole discipline was crippled from the beginning because it chose answers over process.
And this is why the practical route was such a critical exception. Aristotle, the great organizer, was really the only one who got the spiral right, his metaphysics. It wasn't meant to be the starting point. It was supposed to be the final summary he would extract after all his inductive scientific work.
So his famous four causes, the unmoved mover, those weren't dogmas.
The sources suggest they were just temporary scaffolding, categories he left for his students to use until they did more empirical work. His whole project was inductive at its core. Bacon and the positivists didn't start something new. They were just finishing what Aristotle started.
So what does this actually mean for what philosophy is, if it's not about finding truth?
Then its real function is just that two-way movement of induction and deduction. It is the process of abstraction itself, that back and forth between the real world and our frameworks for it.
And when you connect that definition to the actual history, the story changes completely. It becomes less about a noble search for knowledge and more about, posturing, about adjusting its position relative to power.
To God and then to science, yes. And your sources lay this out with four, frankly, audacious metaphors.
Okay, let's get into them. The first 1,500 years, starting with the Church Fathers. This is phase one, the parasite period.
This runs from Augustine all the way to Occam. For all that time, philosophy had one job: to be the auxiliary science to theology.
The handmaiden.
The handmaiden, the service provider. Augustine himself said it. I understand in order to believe. Philosophy wasn't self-sufficient. It had to cling to a host, the absolute truth of God.
So it was just providing the tools, logic, argument.
Precisely. It gave theology the tools to rationalize its own premises. How do we define the Trinity? How do we explain evil? It couldn't generate its own truth. It could only work on truths given by faith.
But then the world starts to change. The Renaissance happens, science gets going, and philosophy has to pivot fast.
Which brings us to phase two, the bat period.
The bet.
From Descartes to Kant. Think of Aesop's fable. Science is becoming this undeniable force challenging everything. So philosophy presents itself as a mediator. It's like the bat telling the birds, I'm a bird, and the mice, I'm a mouse. It plays both sides.
It's trying to survive.
Totally. Descartes builds his whole shelter of reason, but he makes sure to guarantee the certainty of God to keep the theologians from getting upset.
And then Kant comes along and performs the ultimate act of mediation.
The ultimate balancing act. He sets the limits of reason. He basically cordons off a whole area, the divine, the numinous, and says, science, you can't go here. This is for faith.
So he pleases science by giving it the phenomenal world.
But he saves a space for theology. It was a brilliant two-faced move to keep philosophy relevant.
This maneuvering can't last forever, though. Which brings us to the moment philosophy stops trying to please everyone and just tries to take over.
Yes. Phase three, the kingdom period. And this is all Hegel.
Hegel is the runaway point.
He is. He's done being a parasite. He's done being a bat. He declares philosophy king. He takes everything, science, religion, history, the state, and subordinates it all under his system of the absolute spirit.
He's not just defending God anymore. He's replacing God with his own system.
That's the totalitarian move. He basically says natural science is just a minor footnote in the grand story of the spirit. Philosophy is now the thing that dictates the meaning of everything else. It is the self-proclaimed ruler of truth.
But it's a ruler built on a foundation it inherited from theology, right?
Exactly. It's still based on a fixed, absolute premise, which of course leads to the crash, phase 4, the exposure period. And that's Nietzsche.
Nietzsche comes in and just demolishes the whole structure.
He does. His work isn't just about despair or moodiness. It's a brutal, systematic exposure of the whole pretense. He points out that this entire abstract superstructure, from Plato's ideals to Hegel's spirit, was just a human invention.
It had no real foundation.
None. No courage to stand on its own. He's the one who stands up and yells, "The king is naked."
And what happens when the king is exposed?
Well, the system pretended to have absolute truth, but it was always leaning on the authority of God. When that authority really started to fade, the king's clothes just fell off.
And the king retreats. He goes into his castle, which is academic obscurity, and, well, never really comes back out.
And just like that, you can summarize 2,000 years of history in 4 lines. It was a parasite on theology. It became a bat mediating between God and science. It tried to become king, but that king was naked.
And now it hides in the castle. So this brings up a huge question for you listening. If that's where philosophy is now, why on earth is this the right place for it?
The right place means it's finally been stripped of all those kingly clothes. It's revealed as what it should have been all along.
A tool.
Just a tool, a functional tool. Philosophy is the technique of abstraction and organization. That's it. Think back to Aristotle's categories, his logic. They're just conceptual tools for handling a complex world.
Its job isn't to find truth anymore. Science is doing that.
Science is generating the data. Philosophy's job is to provide the framework for that truth, to help us make sense of it all.
A kind of yearly metaphysics.
I love that phrase. Yes. Think about all the knowledge we generate every single year. The Nobel Prizes in physics, medicine, economics. It's overwhelming.
And it's all in silos.
Completely siloed. Philosophy's modern job is to step out of that academic castle and help connect the dots, to provide that annual framework, that yearly metaphysics, to help us understand it.
Like, how do breakthroughs in genetics change our ethics? How does AI challenge our definition of consciousness?
Exactly. The tool has to be applied to new data. If philosophy can just embrace that, forget the pretense of being the king of truth, and just be a flexible framework for our scientific reality, then its long, painful history of self-deception might finally be over.
It's incredible. The whole complex history boils down to those 4 lines because philosophy was just so obsessed with its political relationship to power first God, then science, instead of just doing its job.
The only philosophy that matters now is the one that steps out of the castle, picks up its tools, and gets to work on the complexity that science is giving us every single day.
So a final provocative thought for you to take away. If the king is naked and hiding in his castle, and the tool is just sitting there waiting to be used, then maybe the real philosophical courage today is in tearing down those castle walls and forcing that mechanism of abstraction back out into the real world. What does it change for you when you realize that so much of what we call profound thought was maybe just a 4-stage process of power maneuvering?
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.